Why was that then? Just the
I
technical
technically probably
side?
wasn't as good as I thought I was, and I wasn't ready. If I'm really honest, I wasn't. I'd been doing home buyers at the corporates, and I was stepping up to building surveys. I was getting myself in a little bit of trouble, and only because I just didn't know enough. And honestly, he helped me in that regard. And without him, and someone to bounce off all the time, that bounce thing, whenever you're stuck or whenever you've had a claim, or just to lessen the load, allows you to move forward, doesn't it? So that was, yeah, you're spot on there.
Welcome to the Survey Hub podcast, the podcast for surveyors who just love what they do. I'm Marion Ellis, and in today's episode, I catch up with Mike Schendel, Director of Select Serve, a surveying practice in South London specialising in survey and valuation for a diverse range of residential and commercial clients. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Good morning, Marianne. Thank you very much.
Now, we're both a bit nervous about doing this podcast. Me, because I haven't done one for a little while, and I'm sitting here with a bad back. Yeah. And you, because I think you think I'm going to lift the top of your skull up and get everything out of your brain and all your secrets.
It's my therapy for the day, for the week or the month, isn't it? Yeah.
So tell us a bit about what you do as a surveyor, Mike.
So my company and my partner's company is called Select Serve. We're based in South London. We do quite local. I mean, I think we stick quite locally. We do a lot of residential surveys and valuations, all sorts of valuations. I have branched off slightly that I get a little bit bored with a kind of everyday same thing. So I do now commercial, schools, stuff like that. I'm trying to get into a bit more, schedule of conditions and commercial rents reviews and things like that, just because maybe like any job in life, you just have to vary it, I think, to keep it going. So that's what we do. We're doing very well. Market has slowed slightly, as everyone's saying, but that doesn't matter. It's a good time to take stock.
How did you come up with the business name, Select Serve?
Now you've got me. Is that a good lead in to what
we're
going to talk
about? I'm just always interested because
So
some people talk about giving like a parent's name or using their own name or whatever, and the name has something, and then there's quite a few that use serve on the end. But as you're just saying it, I was just thinking, oh, why is that?
So we're going straight into this one. Okay, so when my old modelling agency was called Select Model Agency. So I took Select and put Serve, and it just said bang.
So let's just go down this avenue.
Now you've got to talk to me about it.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you get into surveying? What did you do before? Because I remember you saying you were a teacher at one point, were you? What do you?
So I'm going to run through my timeline of life quickly. So I'm 22 now. So plus 30. Anyway, I'm 57 now. So I started life as a teacher, PE teacher. Can you believe it? In the 80s, somewhere in the 80s, got scouted to become a model. And this was unexpected, to say the least. So I cut out the teaching, went and travelled for 15 years, so 18 years. While we got to the end of that career, because I was getting fatter and older, I thought I've got to do something else. So my partner now, Scott, was a surveyor for eServe at the time. And I used to talk to him, and we'd known each other since we were 3. So we went to kindergarten together. I was American. And I then studied at White Knights in Reading, did the correspondence course, and did that while I was traveling a lot, got that degree, and then went into 2 or 3 years before my APC. So that's when, then went around the corp, worked for eServe and another medium-sized firm, and then we started our own thing in 2015. Is that timeline correct? Maybe not.
So when you say modelling, we're not just talking about Aaron knitted jumpers, in Woman's Own magazine. Are we?
It did turn out to be like that at the end. That's why I gave up, probably. Yes, but no, the 80s were a really weird time. So the 80s, a male model in the 70s was probably thought of as being a certain So the 80s brought along a lad culture, very much a lad culture. So normal guys were then, I suppose they were in advertising, they were on TV, and then moving on to that lad culture you got in magazines. So, I mean, when I started it, there were very, very laddish guys. There was, it was a very, and the whole industry was quite geared towards very glamorous time because of you had the supermodels time, didn't you? You had all that kind of thing. So I got into it then, and I was lucky because I didn't have to start Aaron Jumpers or whatever it's called. I didn't have to start there. I started quite high up, just so I got a few really good campaigns and advertising and commercials, and that allowed me to kind of take stock. And then I moved around the world. Really, I went to Italy, France. I lived for 2 years in New York. I lived in California, and Japan. So I spent 10 years traveling, pretty much.
So being a proper model, catwalk type.
Proper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are a million questions I can ask you about what's the most ridiculous outfit, what's the most famous person you've met. But I also want to say, for people who've sort of travelled around the world, what kind of properties did you live in? Did that inspire you to be a surveyor in any way?
That's really, really interesting. Because it actually did. I'm not just saying that. So when I don't want to say I was a big property person, even though my parents had moved a few times, done a few developments, etc. I was interested in property, but it did. So if you go down to California, you look at all the timber houses, you go to New York, the brownstones, Paris, all around the world, we have our different styles, no? So you're walking the streets all day, you can't help. And my thing is always to my kids, look up, look above the shops, look up. So that's what I always did. I always looked up everywhere I went because I knew that was the world that was kind of unseen above the shops. And so it did inspire me. And what it did, it allowed me, it's hard to describe, but it taught me a lot. So say in surveying, we always the guy who taught me was very old fashioned. He said, rely on your senses. You don't need a damp meter, blah, blah, blah. You can rely on your senses and all of this and your emotions in a property. Well, if you go back in time a little bit and think about, if you're in a Hamburg bunker doing a photo shoot and it's cold, why is it cold? It's cold because of the construction of the property. So you kind of think about things and you get to a point where you've seen almost every property around the world. And so type of property, and which helps. But funny enough, nowadays I feel much safer just in Victoria and Edwardian in London because it's too hard out there. So that's the weird thing. But yes, so it did teach me something, and it did start the journey.
See, I think being a surveyor, particularly residential, it is quite a sensory, mindful thing. Not to get too woo-woo, not that I am, but it's, when you walk into a property, we use all our senses, even those that we can't even identify as such advanced human beings, that you get a gut feel that something is wrong or something's not quite right. And we're there to prove, and to find it rather than ignore it. So I totally get that whole sensory piece. And also, I think when you're walking into people's homes, and just like you travel the world and lots of different things, you pick up a lot of the culture and the way that people live. Some people
taking your shoes off in Japan. Things, the respect, the fact, you learn so much, you learn weirdly, Japanese people, which I didn't know until the time they don't like to be given gifts. They see it as a bribe. That resonates with our industry a little bit, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? So I think about things like that, lessons learned over time, and you use them, and hopefully that's what it gives you, That's why my 18th birthday to my kids will be travel the world for 2 years and go and don't come back.
Get that culture and that life experience. And I think particularly on the residential side, it gives you that bit of maturity of having to deal with different people, different backgrounds, the different things that you see, good or bad. It can be as difficult walking to a really yucky, poor, rundown property for whatever reason, as much as it is to go into a high value property, knowing that there's no way on earth, even if you won the lottery, that you'd be able to afford something like that. It'd be quite intimidating. So you get to meet people from all different ways. So the more life experience you have, even if it's just picking up the phone, and on working in a call center, to being a model traveling the world, Can I ask you about that transition then, going from that to working as a surveyor or setting up your own business or doing something different? Because I come across a lot of people who do this. A lot of surveyors come into surveying later on in life. It's a second career, and that's a good thing. But sometimes, well, I used to notice that it was estate agents or people who had property related interests coming over into surveying. But I remember I used to teach valuation on the SAVA course a number of years ago. And I remember in the group, there was somebody who was a baker, and there was somebody who repaired pianos, and we were just looking for the candlestick maker, in there. Yeah. People come from different sectors. And I do think it always sort of feels like quite a leap. But how did you find that transition going from something totally different?
I think there's two sides, isn't there? There's the running the business side, which I found very natural because my parents were self-employed. As a model, you're self-employed. That's how it works. You're given a kind of, now they'd call it 0 hours contract or something, but that's how it works. So you do your own tax, VAT, everything. So that's very natural. That side I find very easy. The other side, the dealing with people, again, I found quite easy because of maybe I was 45, I think, when I got into it. The side that I found the most tricky, if I'm honest, is dealing with staff and related around business. That has been always tricky because I was a one-man band and now we're growing. And it's not this tricky, it's just lessons and I don't know anything about it. I don't know, so I'm starting again on everything. So, and as you get older, it probably gets a little bit harder. So if that answers your question, I didn't find it that difficult. So I was lucky enough, like your baker maybe, who's self-employed, I don't know. That's probably the hardest jump. So like my partner, Scott, he would openly admit he doesn't like that side of things. He just doesn't like it. That's my side. Do you know what I mean?
And that's what you often find in a business or a business partnership, is you have somebody who does the technical stuff and somebody who sort of runs the
He's a technical 10
side.
times better than I am. Yeah. And I am probably the business brain, even though we're both getting better, hopefully, like a marriage. We're both creeping over to the other side slowly. And it is a marriage, isn't it?
Mm. So how have you found running your own business then since, 2015, you said?
Oh, I've loved it. I've loved it because I think I was ready. I think that's one thing. I don't know. I look back and I look on your hub and I look at some of the young guys and girls panicking a bit, and I can really feel for them because that is tough out there. Some people haven't had a mortgage, some people haven't had a home, and they're running their business, and I wouldn't want to do it. I'd find it tough. And so I found the business to be up and down, but what I do is I just chill out and don't take a short-term view. I take the yearly view. I don't ever look at the fluctuations of the market. But what I do is and you taught me this, and I'm sorry because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but when you helped me, you taught me to have weekly meetings, which, though I say I don't fluctuate, one thing I do fluctuate on is my prices. So we're on our weekly meeting that we have with Chantel RPA. We talk about prices and fees and where the market's going. But what I don't do is I take a long-term view. There's no point otherwise. You're just going to panic. And we've seen enough wars, famine and stuff, haven't we, to know that this is my fourth recession in my life or something. So it's fine. It will be fine.
It is really hard out there for, say, younger surveyors or newer surveyors into the sector, because the property market does go up and down.
Yeah.
Or rather, depends which newspaper you read as to whether there's a crisis and a crash and different things. But you have to understand why you do it, what you're there to provide. But it's so easy to, read something, hear somebody panicking. And when I see, you become very reactive, don't you, to, hands in the air, somebody somewhere's got a claim. That's it. It's the end of the world. Why should I be in this business? Similarly, as we're recording this today, a medium-sized firm has ceased trading. A number of surveyors who've lost their jobs. And it's interesting because I've been contacted by a number of surveyors who don't run their businesses, work for others, and they're so disenchanted, if you like, about, you know, their hopes and dreams for a career, and all of a sudden it's doom and gloom, and you get into that spiral. And I do think a lot of people don't, and a lot of surveyors don't understand enough about business.
They don't. 100%. I can see the mistakes all the firms. I mean, if I may, and this is quite insensitive, but the best of, as you get further away from your locality and you spread yourself thinner, you're more open, aren't you, to the fluctuations? There's no doubt about it. I mean, I could walk down the road here in Clapham and Balham, go and see a couple of agents and drum up work for next week if I want to, or make a few phone calls. Do you know what I mean? It's just easy because it's trust. And so I think that's, if I'm wrong, I may be wrong, forgive me. There's firms I'm seeing going tend to be the ones that are spreading slightly and maybe too quickly, maybe, sometimes. I wouldn't do it now because I've seen that mistake. Yeah, it's hard. It's very difficult to.
I think you're right. It's spreading yourself thin. It's chasing the fee. Whereas, and I think that's a really good point. And it's something I sometimes ask my clients, is if you had to earn £1,000 tomorrow or this week, do you know how you could go and drum up that business? And a lot of them don't. They'll be saying, well, I'll get on a panel, or I'd sit and wait for the work to come in, or but you have to, if you're in front of your own business, you have to know how to do that. And it's a reminder that that's all you need to do.
Yeah. I don't know. Everyone's different, aren't they? And everyone's locality is different. But I do think, going back to what you said, I mean, I think if, almost a business lesson to all the young guys would really help people. It really would. You're kind of, rather than, we always focus on surveying, don't we? Maybe we should be focusing on, especially now, what is the business? VAT is like, let's go back to school, isn't it? Whoever taught you about VAT, whoever taught you about tax, whoever taught you about anything financially, and it's what we lack. And I think that's, I suppose, that's.
But equally, if you don't know, and that isn't your bag, you find somebody who does. Just like you and Scott in your, business as a partnership.
Yes.
Where your responsibilities are, and you've got the right jigsaw pieces, if you like, to put together.
So I started it, forgive me, I kind of glossed over this. I started this for a year by myself, and after a year I was either going to give up or bring Scott in. If Scott said no to me, I think I would have given up. I found it I'll go back to the corporate sector. I found it too hard.
Why was that then? Just I
technically probably wasn't as good as I thought I was, and I wasn't ready. If I'm really honest, I wasn't. I'd been doing home buyers at the corporates, and I was stepping up to building surveys. I was getting myself in a little bit of trouble, and only because I just didn't know enough. And honestly, he helped me in that regard. And without him, and someone to bounce off all the time, that bounce thing, whenever you're stuck or whenever you've had a claim, or just to lessen the load, allows you to move forward, doesn't it? So that was, you're spot on with that. I'd always recommend someone does it with someone else, starts a business if they can.
So it's quite, at the moment, there's a bit of a culture of, well, I'll start up on my own. New starters find it hard to find mentors or to find the right role, whereas firms don't necessarily want to take on trainees, or there are some who work for themselves and they don't want to help others because it's a bit of competition in the patch, and it's a nightmare to try and navigate. I have to say. But the more, I guess, we can just talk about it, the solutions will be found. We don't have to have all of the answers.
Okay, so this is, I think, I'm quite proud of myself because I wouldn't have done this at 20, 30 or 40, to trust me. So Jeremy, who sits there, you never met Jeremy, but Jeremy decided to go by himself, and he still sits next to me in the office. He's still in the office and more than welcome. And because now, later in life slightly, I realise that there is a lot to be gained from both of you doing it. I'm watching him. I see his enthusiasm. One, I'm bouncing off of that again. Two, he's not trying to stitch me up. He's trying to do his own thing in his own life. And you get to that point, don't you, in life a little bit more when you bring him out the block a few times. It's a bit like, being married 4 times or something, isn't it? And you just hopefully you learn from that habit. And that I think, and would never have let him sit there in my 20, 30. It would have been competition. It would have been someone who was absolutely trying to, take something from me as a lion that I'm not going to allow. And I don't see it like that at all anymore. I think there's enough work for all of us if we do the right thing and we do the right job and everyone's, we're all cool. There is enough work.
But I suppose it's a bit of life experience that that's got you to that. There's a quote that I sometimes rattle off to people by a lady called Bernadette Jiwa, and it's, when you know who you are, you're not competing.
I love that.
Good, isn't it? When you
I love that.
who you are, what you're about, why you do what you do,
when you're not
competing. Yeah.
When you could stand back and say, I'm comfortable in my skin, is a nice feeling. And funny enough, I was talking to someone the other day about looking at my children and thinking, oh my God, I'm so pleased I'm not young. It's so difficult to be young, isn't it? And anyway, it's going, we all learn and live and learn. But what I want to say to, if anything, to the younger guys is, take your time, because it's tricky. It's tricky. Don't get yourself in trouble. Because once you burn yourself, haven't you, in your locality. Take your time if you can. There's no rush. I think, because I believe that these kids, unlike you and I, well, you're younger than me, but, they're going to live to 100, and they are, if they started their career at 25, at 45, they may have burnt out anyway and want another career, and that's good as well. So I think they've got to realise they've got to be flexible in their brains now, and they've got to be emotionally flexible. And I'm a really big believer that stop beating yourself up and just move on, keep moving on. You'll be fine, but don't rush if you can. Don't rush.
It's taking the time to learn from failure, but also learn from your successes, and even things like, and we do this in my mastermind. At the end of the week, just reflecting on what's gone well. If it didn't go well, what did you do to overcome it? How did you get through it? And just sometimes taking that time to reflect. Just like you have your weekly meetings and a check-in, and it can make such a difference. But when you work for yourself, you don't always have that. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. Sometimes it's just, it's setting yourself a little reminder to check in. How with it? I do it myself. I work for myself, but it does help you then with that growth mindset, I guess, of noticing what's going well, what isn't. If things didn't go well, why was that? Was it something to do with your work, really, or was it actually just because there was stuff going on in your life? Physically, are you tired? You're not well. Is it different stuff? Because we're all human at the end of the day. It's interesting you say. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say that. I'm sorry, I'm blowing your trumpet all the time, but you told me something to do, and it's been invaluable. I just ask people in my staff how they are, and everyone opens up to you. I'm just really shocked. I've never asked anybody how they are. Oh, good morning. What are we doing? Work. Always work. Just people open up. And it gives them the freedom. And you know what? It sounds really stupid. And since I've said that to them, people just weren't taking holidays. I was like, that's great. I love it. But please take holidays. You're going to burn out. Please, please, please take holidays. Now people take holidays. I think we've opened that space. And silly things like just said, it sounds really a bit hippy-dippy, but it's worked. Thank you.
But it's what you're doing. You're creating psychological safety.
Yeah.
It's those spaces where people can say, actually, I'm not coping, or they can say, actually, Mike, this is not right. This is not the job that we should do, or this is, a risk. And it starts with those small things, but creating that, and that's all part of employee engagement and things, but creating those spaces where you can speak is so important, because you work with people. Just going back to your, the hardest part is managing people and all that comes with that.
It's been the biggest lesson to me. Absolutely. I'm not ever going to get it right in this lifetime, but it's one thing I've just had to start at zero and start, and it was, it's a lesson. That's a hard one. Like you say, even though you say that you're self-employed, you work by yourself, you interact with millions of people, don't you?
Millions, as if.
Millions. I heard at the hub, but Gemma, what do we do? I see some this morning. I said, hello, how are you? Property 5-second chat, in, out, boom, gone. Now in the office all day by myself, aren't I? It's learning it's good. And I think the Jeremy situation, when he hears this podcast, hopefully you're happy. That's from you that allowed me to be that person as well. It's much better. It's much better.
Can I ask you how you feel about being a leader of your business? Sort of being in charge. Do you enjoy that?
I don't like it, if I'm honest. It's my least favourite thing, because politically I don't really believe in the kind of pyramid downwards thing, I believe. But then I am a hypocrite because I like having a bit more money in there. So I kind of like, I'm like a champagne socialist, aren't I, in my mind? So I don't enjoy the leadership thing. I enjoy the business kind of quote thing, like you were just saying. Like I enjoy planting one seed and see if it goes, where it grows, but I don't enjoy. I tend to leave the leadership thing to Scott and Chantel and a bit more. I think I do anyway. Yeah, I don't find that very interesting, because the typical leader is a bit authoritarian, aren't they? And I've had that at my jobs in surveying, and I don't really like it.
I think leadership is interesting, because leadership isn't necessarily the same as being in charge. You can be in charge and make decisions, but leadership can be lots of different things. You're a leader in terms of the way that you rally the troops, the way that you manage the business, the way that you work with people in the three of you in your leadership team. And I often see that some surveyors, it's interesting. I love people watching surveyors, but because I've got like some surveyors who are in charge because they've been there the longest, but they probably absolutely hate managing people, dealing with all the HR type stuff. They love the being respected for the technical side of the job. But so the leadership role they've got, sort of more people leadership rather than technical leadership authority, if that makes sense.
It does. I think that when the corporates, I saw better surveyors in the corporates still there than ever started their own business, but they just couldn't make the switch. In surveying practices, I tend to find, and people won't like this, but we're not quite as good technically as these other guys, but we're better at business. So, and perhaps leadership. So we just have those qualities. I think you can, it makes me think about succession and the fact that it's a good business to buy a surveying firm. You make X amount of money per year, pretty steady. And you could be a businessman and run it from the top just as a business, and you can then just run a team, can't you? So it's almost a good business for a good practice for a businessman just to walk in the door and make a good amount of money out of as well, in terms of succession, in terms of you don't always have to sell to the trainees. Does that make sense? That's probably what I'm thinking.
It does.
It does cross into business quite a lot. And
we see this actually with some surveying businesses out there where they've got non-surveyors running the business.
Yes, I've seen it.
But then you have a bit of a disconnect of trying to run it in a slightly different way to the way that surveyors and the market want and what's needed. But it's just being in tune, isn't it? You can have anybody in a leadership position as long as you all gel as a team and you understand what's the vision for the business, what's the plan, what are you there, who are you trying to help, what's the reason, and just keep on coming back to that and aligning to it.
It's a business plan, isn't it? It is a plan. It's a plan that you've got to keep. You've got to have business. There's a reason why banks ask for business plans when you want to get a loan, isn't there? There's a proper reason. I mean, putting the science to it is very, very important. And you keep that. You keep on that path, and the moment you veer off of that path, like we've been seeing with some firms having trouble, is when you do get keep to that plan always. Don't ever move. Our motto is always be local. And I notice as soon as we get off of that path and I accept jobs that were not in my locality, I get myself in trouble a little bit, which is pretty obvious. What RICS says you shouldn't do, and blah blah blah. So there's no. Again, it's not rocket science, but so that is my number one thing. Keep local. And
it's just come back to knowing who you are and what you do as a business, isn't it?
Absolutely. And yeah. So it works for us. yeah, and I think it's always worked, you know, and I think that's probably what I'm not saying the guys who are starting, because the guys who are starting have got enthusiasm and they could travel a lot more and they could do all this. But I think if you can keep local in your locality, you will do better long term.
One of the things I know you're passionate as a business is like supporting charities, and I know you do a bit with Battersea Dogs Home, don't you?
Only because I'm a softie and I love dogs more than people.
Tell me about how that comes up.
Oh, so it really came about by I have two lovely boxer dogs, and which I adore, and I was asked to do a job for them. And then I went there to because so they need all these commercial people now. As I'm trying to get more into my commercial, they need a health and safety plan every 5 years or so for each different part. So it could be a metal stairs, and I've got to go along and just check the metal stairs is fine, sign it off, and look at the corrosion, blah blah blah. But and then while I was there, I was looking over the tops. I mean, it was just like heartbreaking. I could have never left. I could have stayed there my first time, and I just stood there all day and night. And so I just thought to myself, if you want to give something back, where do I want to give something back to? So what I do is I put pro bono work for them now. They call me up and I just go down and do their health and safety stuff. And I know dogs are only dogs, but I just kind of feels like I'm doing something. And what it does, it allows us to also as a firm. So say I'm doing, I don't know, let's, for instance, last week I went and helped an older lady and just did a little job for her and said, don't pay, just send £100 to Battersea Dogs Home. So it allows those little things in the community you can do without being awkward. She's got a checkbook out, you know, from Abbey National or something. And I'm going, no, just, you know what I mean? I haven't seen a check for about 2 years, and I'm just saying, no, just send, you know, she said she was going to go down there to the cafe on Sunday and give them £100. So I love that. It's my little bit so that when I go upstairs to meet my maker, he would take me in.
And I think there's something there I think for a lot of people on, you know, yeah, you've got your business and the things that you do to earn money, but there are so many different ways that you can make an impact or make a difference to the things that matter. One of the things that I do all sorts of things because I go down rabbit holes, you know, with my women in surveying and the Surveyor Hub and things like that. But every time someone books in to do a podcast or joins a Surveyor Hub or joins my mastermind, then I use something called B1G1. And
it's like a token thing.
Yeah, and it sort of like makes you know, like a donation, and it makes impact. So it's not just, you know, donating a tenner to somebody, been collecting bricks. So every time we did some Surveyor Hub sessions earlier on in the year, and you know, a load of bricks were donated to help someone build a home, and it's making an impact. And you know, listen, if I can do it as a small business by myself, then lots of other people can do lots of things. But I suppose some people feel it's a bit inauthentic, maybe, I don't know, sort of pairing with charities or donating with things. I think it's how you approach it, I suppose, isn't it?
I think, again, would I have done it in my 20s, 30s? I don't know, man. I think I'm looking forward. I'm planning my life and I'm thinking I'm 57 now. Okay, I'll stop at 65. I'll be doing a couple of surveys a week. Then what do I want to do? Okay, so Mike, where do you want to give back so that when you do go upstairs, he does let you in? Keep your shoes on. So I want to give back by, you know, maybe schools. Let's say schools. Let's go down the school route, you know. We can give back, can't we? We can give back church charities, anything, just give back. And I think, but then maybe that's an older thing, is it? I don't know. Maybe
I don't know. I think you get to a point in life maybe where the work you do has to be more meaningful.
It has to be.
You know, you might be on the hamster wheel of, you know, doing the work, earning the money, or bringing up the kids, whatever it is. But you just get to a point where, what does this mean? What difference does it make? And I don't know whether it's, I know there's other people who listen to this who aren't in residential, but when you see people's lives and you see the things that are important and the roofs over people's heads, and you think, well, if you can put yourself in a position to make a difference and it's not that hard to do, then why wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason not to. If you can just, well, I know, and I get it's not authentic and stuff. I get all that, but it's just like, I'm the first to criticize people, you know, the Bonos and the Stings of the world. If I had a revolution, they'd be first up against the wall. But that's just my little personal quirk. But so I agree. It's you. I think I liked it. Makes me feel good. It's selfish as well. It makes me feel good about myself.
Well, that's the thing. If it's hard not to do good without feeling good at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. And then there is, and I think, well, where are we going to use this knowledge? How are we going to use this knowledge? My kids don't want to be a surveyor, so won't want to be surveyors. So how am I going to use it? There will be knowledge, and there will be boredom time in the future, and put it together, and we've got a really good thing going on to help people, haven't we?
You mentioned before about our kids living to over 100, and you just talking there about the future and your retirement plan. And do you know what? In my head, I can just see you being a dog walker.
I've got a bad hip. Apart from the bad hip, if you could get me to the front of the hip replacement list, maybe. Do you know what? Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, wouldn't that be lovely?
What do you think about the future of surveying? Not for it to be I don't really. But
I haven't been down this wormhole of AI and stuff. It's still a people's business. Well, it's residential. It's still a people's business. What are you going to do? Send a drone in there? I don't understand it. Maybe you might tell me now. I think the future of surveying is very healthy. I don't think we can be replaced. I think certain parts will be replaced. But then again, taking the old ordnance survey maps out of the drawer against looking at it on the net have been amazing. So I think it's going to be more efficient. Unless I'm missing something, I think the future surveying is very healthy. It's very healthy. I can't see a downside to it. Personally, am I wrong? Is there something I'm missing?
I think it's evolving, just like surveying has always evolved. There was a time when we didn't have home buyer surveys, for example, and more information and data, like maps online and the upfront information and all of those things is helpful, but it doesn't help you feel, perhaps as a home buyer or somebody who owns a home, feel confident or to know what to do. You can have all the information in the world, but what do you do? And that's where I think as surveyors, and perhaps the way that you run your business and the kind of surveys that you do, you don't feel it as much because you probably do it already. But some people don't interact with their clients. They don't talk to them about their fears and worries. So when people are phoning up to get a survey, and to get a quote, they're probably, most people talk about when can you do it, how much is it, terms, all of those things. Whereas a starting point of a conversation could be, tell me what you're worried about. What do you think I can help you with? And you start to tune into those really personable bits. And that's where talking to clients and understanding people can really help. So whatever information comes, or how things change, it comes back to the, surveying being sensory. You move in, what is it going to be like to live in this room?
Well, so I would think that, this is a guess, Chantel would tell me more. I would think we get, I don't know, so every year, say we get 10 inquiries a day. Let's just say 10 inquiries a day. So we get 50 a week. My maths is terrible. What's 50 times 50? And then, but that's how many, different clients we're dealing with, aren't we? Different personalities, different emotions. So you need to start off. You need to start off with the question, what do you want out of this? What's worrying you? What can we do for you? Can you give me a list of what you want? We need to start that before you start the quote. You have to. You're spot on, because otherwise you can't deal with everyone. You've got to know them slightly. You've got to know what foreign buyers are like who are buying from Hong Kong. Do you know what I mean? You get to feel so.
That's an interesting way to put it. So 10 inquiries a day, 50 inquiries a week, that's 50 different people who all want different things, have different expectations.
100% different.
How do you manage it? And yet they're all coming to you for what?
They're coming to you for peace of mind and comfort, first of all, I find.
Yeah, and reassurance.
But touching on, and that's the number one thing they're looking for. They're looking for a safe pair of hands, going back in the day, expression that probably used to use. And then moving forward, and now because my brain is jumping, what we're talking about. I mean, what's the future? So is the future going to be to do with the environment, how we deal with our houses in the future? All that. So that's the rabbit hole I haven't gone down enough because I'm too busy. But that is the change in the future, probably, isn't it? And it probably catch me out. But that's where it's going somewhere. I've started to see health surveys for houses. I've started to see. I had a client the other day that said he was being employing a surveyor after my survey to spend £450 on a health survey to walk around the property when he moves in. I was like, I'll have that money. I'll do it. But, clever. Someone's jumped into that market. Future plan, his house. He wants to live there 10 years with his wife, bring up 2 children. He wants to start. That's, he doesn't want surprises.
And that's the difference, isn't it? This is moving away from here's a report, which is sold effectively as an insurance guarantee. Whether we say the words or not, that's the impression that the public have.
Yeah.
But what they want is help with, how do I live in this home? How does it keep me safe for the next 10, 50 years? How can I expand it when I discover I'm having twins, or I'm getting a boxer dog or whatever.
How do you knock that wall down? Is it safe? Is that wall load bearing? All those things that hopefully you're the next point. They come back to you, but I think it's changing quite rapidly in that department. It's just that reminds me, I've got to take someone on to do all that work. It's hard, isn't it? It's hard because that's a big field. I mean, that is a whole new field.
It is.
It's a great field. But
there's a couple of things I'd mention. There's a new RICS, I think it's a guidance note on healthy buildings. I'll put a link to it in the show notes and send it to you. Because that is, how we live in our homes, and it being healthy is certainly something that we should all have on our radar. And our challenge as surveyors is, how do we bridge that gap between this utopia of everything being healthy and sustainable and great, and bringing it back to the reality of you're walking into a property today, and what does it look like, and how do you help somebody? The other thing on the sustainability side and energy efficiency in those side, I think it's a really interesting time. I've tried to push myself to attend different events, webinars, training. I'm doing some retrofit training next month. I went to a webinar, the Harris debate in the RICS, which was all talking about how is it going to be funded and all of those things. And so much of it was over my head. But the more you sort of familiarize yourself with it, the more I start to see, how we can sort of bridge the gap or understand. But the thing with the whole sustainability piece is that right now we don't know if the things that we're doing to properties are going to help or hinder in the next 20 years. Are they going to be the defects of the future, like we're seeing with spray foam or external wall insulation and things, because it's not being done properly, and it's hard to sort of go down that road because we don't know there's no certainty, there's no confidence.
We don't know what,
so therefore it's hard to advise clients on what the right or wrong thing is to do. And so it's sort of having that watching brief of how things evolve until the right course comes along, or the right bits of information. But there's certainly for clients, they want to know more, and being energy efficient is not the same as sustainability and saving the climate and getting to net zero, because all the things you might do to a property could be different. And what we seem to be missing is, what's that whole bigger picture? What's the whole vision? Which is for someone to live in a home that's healthy and keeps them well, that doesn't destroy the planet at the same time. Because if we don't look after people, we can focus on the planet, but there might not be people to live in it on the planet. What comes first? And it's that sort of bigger picture that
we should be at the far forefront of this, shouldn't we? I mean, even in front of architects, really. But then unfortunately someone like Phil Spencer would come along and take our thunder again. But we really should be, shouldn't we, somewhere? That's our job, isn't it? It is our job. It's not for me, because but it's for the next bunch, I think, to come along and really grab that and push that forward. I mean, I think we're in the middle transition at the moment, aren't we? Like you say, I only saw my second ever external insulation render the other day, and it was damp inside. So how do I learn? I'm in the middle of London. You don't see it. So how does one learn? But we've got to go on these courses, of course, and find, because it's going to come more and more and more.
Yeah, and this is where if as a a profession, we're really committed to this, then all of this stuff has got to be readily accessible, the norm, included in our fees or whatever.
Yes.
So that it's just what we do, and things got to change. But at the moment, it does feel like we have to find the time, push ourselves to learn stuff that seems quite alien to us.
And I'll be really honest. I wake up some mornings and I see a client has contacted me and I see something flash on my email when I'm in bed. And I think, oh no, it's a complaint. Because I haven't spoken to them for 6 months. But it's actually just saying to Mike, how you doing? I was just wondering this question about, is that wall of it? But so you hide, you start to hide. It's really bad, but you do. You kind of hide in your head because you're worried about the claims culture and things like that. So it's trying to find the balance of all these things. And I think it's difficult. Yeah, it's very. Now you're talking to me. Now I've got all interested in this. Now suddenly I'm going to start going on these webinars. They are actually really.
I'll send you a link to it.
Okay. You've got me now going now thinking about it. But
it's interesting you saying there about claims though, because it does scar us. They are upsetting. They're few and far between in context, and I think we have to remember that. But it's quite an emotional thing to get over, as much as a practical and sometimes financial thing to get over. And I suppose that's where, as our profession and roles evolve, it moves from not just giving someone what they feel is an insurance guarantee and then drop you an email 6 months to say, what does this bit on the house do, Mike? Or, can I ask you a question? And it's evolving that relationship to the thing that you do is, yes, you give them some initial advice, but then you plan in that check-in 3 months, 6 months. Where are you at? What can I help you with? And it becomes the norm, which sort of diffuses that.
It does diffuse. That's the word. If you can do that, and I have done that on occasions when I've seen, how can I say, the house is a bit, the house is always going to throw up a lot of problems. I can feel it, and they're not ready for it. They haven't read the report. So I do try and check in occasionally with these people on these ones, and it does diffuse a lot of problems. But it's having time, isn't it? A medium-sized, small-sized firm, it finds it hard to have time.
Oh, but you see, that's where, it is initially taking a leap of faith, but it's repositioning what your service is. So your service isn't just, here's the report, I'll speak to you before and after, if at all. Your service is, I'm going to expect the property. We are going to talk. If you're going to work with me, we are going to talk afterwards. That's non-negotiable. Let's book in the time to do that. And you're paying for that. And you're paying for me to speak to you again in 3 months and 6 months.
If they want to, they can. Yeah,
it's changing it's taking control and saying, this is what the service is. And I do this because if you don't read this report, you might have a shock and you're not going to understand something. And I want you to know everything that you need to know so that you can go and do what you need to do. And I think there's a real responsibility here with consumers who are buying a property and who are paying for a report to bloody use it. Just like when you buy a car and you put it on the road, you have to have a driving license and you have to take on that insurance and have that responsibility.
Yeah.
When you buy a property, you have to take on that responsibility too, to make sure that you're keeping it safe, that you're looking after it, that you're maintaining it. And, you can go on about, how it's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy and all of that business, but it's also probably the most dangerous thing, potentially, if it goes on fire. Or
absolutely.
in terms of your health. And so there's a responsibility for you to, you're buying a property to keep you warm, safe and dry. What are you going to do to maintain that?
I was speaking to someone yesterday and he'd had his next door neighbour had a fire, gutted the whole house, which is rare. He said it's fantastic for them because they've been put in a hotel for a year. He's got to live with the smell coming through the solid walls in his house for the last year, and his insurance company won't do a thing about it, nor theirs. And I was like, that's very interesting. So I know there's all sorts of laws you can push it, but are you going to? And you're right, you have to. There is a responsibility to live in a house, isn't there? There's a big, and especially flats. Grenfell, we're going down the Grenfell route. There's not, but there's a big responsibility here.
And that's where I guess you then get into, you don't want to go down to the victim shaming, it's not the tenant's fault that a property is damp, and often landlords blame tenants for all sorts of things. But there's a balance here of, we don't teach people in school to cook properly, to do your finance, to manage condensation and how to live in a home. You know, there's some basic life skills, sadly, just as we don't recognise that actually if you're going to have overcrowded properties, if you're going to have lots of people living in a house, which means it's sweaty and condensation, then you've got to build for that purpose, you know, or make sure that they're you've got that responsibility to make sure it's safe and comfortable. Otherwise, people will do whatever they need to do in the home, you know, in terms of heating on, heating off, and all of those things. And so it's quite hard, I think, to look at buildings in isolation without people.
I started last year doing a lot of housing disrepair work, but it was a little bit slower. It opened my eyes.
Tell me about that for some people who've never done that. What is that?
So I was working predominantly for landlords through a company, very good company, if they're listening. So I would have to go along, and normally I think what happened was the tenant made a complaint, or a number of complaints, had then gone to a no win, no fee solicitor. I'd come along working for the Landlord Council Association just to inspect at the same time as their surveyor. And we're looking at, and it's 99% condensation. It is, or condensation related issues. But I think what the eye opener for me is honestly how people live. It's difficult. It's difficult to see. So the basic inspection is no different to any other inspection in life. You know, it's the cause, finding the trail and following it. You know, it's the same thing. There's no difference, but it's how people live, and not their fault. The poverty that's in this country, you just don't realise. I mean, it's been a long time for me, you know, and you don't do those flats when you're surveying, really. Local authority deep into Deptford flats as much as maybe one used to.
Yeah, I was just about to say, on the residential side, you're doing remortgages, you're doing house purchases. You're not.
I've done 10,000 of those. I haven't seen what I saw in housing disrepair. I promise you, it's a whole world I haven't seen before. It's deep into terrible kind of landlord country, and you know what I mean, and just neglected houses and lack of education to tenants. Of course, there's always that. But I mean, it made me realise, you know. And now what I do is I take my older boy, who's a teenager, into some of these estates, and I say, have a look around you. See how lucky you are. It's not nice to live. It's not a great place to live if you can help it. Anyway, and that's kind of
and maybe that's the that's the thing that we just need to remember as surveyors. We talk about, you know, how diverse our clients are, how diverse surveyors are in the work that we do.
Oh no, but we're middle class, home buying class.
Yeah,
we're not.
Yeah.
There is a whole world, isn't there? And this sounds patronising. There's a whole world out there that is the non-buying public, and it makes me think about, you know, the rented sector more and how it's treated and how long-term tenants should be treated and all these things. And it's just very interesting. It's a whole side that, again, we probably don't have time to deal with, but we should be looking at more. And
maybe that's the thing that surveyors we need to do, is either get experience of that work, because let's face it, I'm sure there were some juicy defects in there that you could that you saw that you never had experience of. But it also means that you've got solutions, and it brings that cognitive diversity of thinking, of problem solving, and we only have to open up our blinkers a little bit more to join these sustainability webinars, to understand a bit more about housing disrepair, you know, and it just opens up our eyes to what's out there, and it just gives us a bit of a different perspective that can stand us as surveyors and property professionals in good stead to help save the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, it won't be in my lifetime, but I'm hoping some of these guys will. I'm hoping girls will. I hope that's what they will do, and they will have more one eye on that side that we maybe weren't brought up with, and it'd be natural to them to think.
Do you know it would? But do you know what? You say that, not in my lifetime, but you might live, you know, quite long.
I smoked for 20 years.
So did my gran.
Say the same thing. Yeah,
She went on forever. But I think that's the thing that I would call you out on, in the
you're right.
Not in my lifetime,
right?
But some of it can work in a lifetime, and what people like you're not that much older than me, but people that like you can actually contribute to others to help it happen.
Oh, don't, you're inspiring me now on a Wednesday. I don't like that. Yeah, no, it's true. It is true. There is more. There is more that can help happen. And yes, we should. We should. I suppose how? On a small level first. Your firm changes its work. That's all it takes.
That's all how it starts. Level,
you start to look at that side of things and you move on. Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? It is interesting.
And on that note, Mike, it's been lovely to talk to you today. As I leave you with that, right, I'm going to go and change my business and...
I know. It's been, sorry if I've babbled.
No, it's been fabulous to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. And it's always lovely to see you and speak to you.
Thanks for listening. If you're new to the podcast, do check out some of our past recordings. And when you're ready, leave a review on Google or Apple iTunes. Or you can buy me a coffee. All the links are in the show notes. And if you want to find out more about how working with me can support your surveying business journey, just drop me a message or take a look at the resources for surveyors and small businesses at lovesurveying.com. I'll see you next time.